Coming up on this episode, I'm joined by my Fansided colleague Josh Cornelissen to discuss everything to do with the Warriors training camp, the major question marks, biggest storylines, plenty of talk on Jonathan Kuminga, Andrew Wiggins, Moses Moody, and pretty much everyone up and down the Warriors roster. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to the channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252, that's POK252 on X/Twitter. You can also follow Josh at Cornelissen NBA as well. And other than that, guys, enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the podcast, Josh. Last time we had you on, we were talking trades, free agency. The Lauri Markkanen thing was still up in the air at that point, so it's great to be able to talk actual basketball with you coming up here in the next week or two, of course, preseason, and then the Warriors season opener against the Portland Trail Blazers on October 23. You've brought kind of three talking points, storylines entering training camp. I've brought three to the table as well. If they cross over in any way, then so be it. Did you want to start us off with one thing you're kind of looking forward to in training camp and preseason?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thanks for having me back, Peter. It's always great to be on the podcast. I will say it's kind of bizarre to think that when we had that conversation ahead of the offseason, we just assumed some sort of big trade would happen, and nothing did. Paul George fell through, Markkanen fell through. And so I think what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on the young players who they have retained heading into training camp. And so my first question storyline is going to be whether Jonathan Kuminga can shoot. So he's been pretty inconsistent to start his career, 34.1% overall, 33% as a rookie, jumped up to 37, back to 32 last year. And Steve Kerr has talked pretty openly about if Kuminga can't shoot, it's hard to play him at the three and kind of shoehorns him into playing power forward. Kuminga has said, he's recently on the TK show with Tim Kawakami, and he talked about how he's been working on his shot. He's comfortable, he's confident. But the big red flag for me is that even as Kuminga's minutes have increased, his role has increased, his usage has increased, his 3-point attempts per game have basically flatlined. Every year, it's been 2.2 attempts per game or so. So can he not only increase his accuracy, but increase the volume to be a real threat from outside and for defenses to really guard him to the point that Kerr is comfortable playing him at the three, which will obviously unlock a lot more lineup options with him and Draymond and a big or different things like that. So I want to see in the preseason, is Kuminga shooting with confidence, accuracy? Are they letting him get the attempts up? Or is that just lip service and he's really the same player he's been to this point?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting and one of the biggest things we're going to need to see in preseason. It does kind of lend itself to one of my talking points, which was kind of lineup combinations, and specifically one of those is JK at the three. He is labeling himself a small forward, which is at odds with what Steve is still saying. Obviously, what Steve has shown in terms of the lineups he's put out there throughout JK's 3 years to date have seen him primarily at the four. And even yesterday, I think I think it might have been with Tim Kawakami as well, Steve said that, he's a small forward when we have a shooting five out there. Okay, great. The Warriors don't have a shooting five. That's a problem, unless you're going to include Quinton Post, who's 52nd overall pick rookie on a 2-way contract. Very unlikely we're going to see him in too much of the rotation, let alone with Kuminga, another young player out there as well. So that is certainly something like, do the Warriors need to make a move there in terms of a trade before we can even see JK at the three? I know you've wrote previously about the potential of Brook Lopez or someone like that. They obviously went and tried to get Markkanen, which, he's not a center as such, but a 7-footer who can shoot like him. That would have clearly been ideal. So it is going to be fascinating to see whether or not that shot has come along and whether or not it's enough to be able to adjust Steve's mindset when it comes to that. Because otherwise, there really is a limit on how many minutes he can play. Because if he's just a power forward and that's it, and you've also got to fit in, like Draymond will play, I don't know what Draymond's split's going to be, but maybe it's 50-50 between the 4 and the 5. Who knows? You fit in Kyle Anderson into that as well. That means that JK can really only play 25 to 28 minutes a game rather than the 30 plus. He's young, talented, athletic. I think he should probably be leading the team in minutes per game. this season. He should be playing 32 plus minutes a game if everything goes right. But it's going to be hard if Steve's just completely unwilling to play him at the 3 whatsoever. In terms of other lineup combinations that I'm interested to see in the preseason, so Slow-mo coming in, Kyle Anderson, I think a lot of people see him as a different, a similar-ish version of Draymond Green, and just being able to have another version of Draymond Green out on the floor when he's gone to the bench. I'm super interested to see how much Draymond and Anderson can play together. And then again, like Kuminga's part of that conversation as well. And can you play the 3 of them? Probably not, unlikely, but who knows? Like that's a combination we could see. All this kind of experimental stuff that is exactly what preseason is for. And if Slow-mo and Draymond can play together and do that effectively, then that signing, that acquisition of Kyle Anderson just becomes so much more valuable than, again, if they can't play together and Draymond's playing 28 minutes, then all of a sudden Kyle Anderson is limited to playing 20 minutes, for example. And therefore he's not playing the kind of 22 to 25 minutes that I could otherwise see him if him and Draymond can play together. Is that like, do you think that's something that will work, like an Anderson Draymond 4-5 combination?
That's a great question. So I think what speaks well to that working together is both of them are used to operating with the ball in their hands and passing and cutting and things like that in tight windows. And so, neither one of them has been able to shoot their entire career. So they kind of get that feel, they get that understanding. They've played with traditional 5, so they understand cramp spacing. So I wonder if maybe it would sort of work, that defensively it would be solid. They could switch really easily between them. I think they could handle bigger defensive assignments. And then offensively, like, okay, they're not spacing the court, but if you get shooters at the other 3 positions, then one of them's at the elbow, another one cuts or sets a screen off ball for Steph or for Pods, or they're moving baseline. They're going to crash the glass with the right angles. Like, I wonder if they're just savvy, just crafty enough for that pairing to work.
Yeah, maybe just the IQ of both those guys is enough to kind of counteract the fit in terms of the lack of shooting and stuff like that. And Draymond shot 40% last season. Team still didn't guard him, but that was a nice surprise, I think, for us. And Slow-mo, I mean, he just can't shoot 22.5% again from 3. Like, if he's doing that, then, yeah, he's probably not averaging any more than 20 minutes a game. And who knows what will happen from there. Just my last point in terms of the lineup combinations, I'm really interested to see. So if the Warriors go with Steph and Pods in the backcourt, Wiggins at the 3, then where does that leave the combination off the bench in terms of D'Anthony Melton, obviously, big off-season signing, so too is Buddy Hield, and then you've got Moses Moody and Gary Payton II as well. That's kind of 4 guys who should all be playing, and I know you're a huge Moody fan, and you've still got, inklings that he can be a really valuable player in this league. And I agree to an extent, but I see the number of guys the Warriors have available to them at the shooting guard, small forward positions. And I just wonder, like, how do you see the hierarchy there in terms of those 4 players specifically, if they're all having to come off the bench?
That's a great question. How does Steve Kerr want to balance the kind of the offense first kind of punch of someone like Buddy Hield, or more the defensive side with, okay, let's give more minutes to Melton and things like that. Honestly, I feel like you could convince me of any of 100 different combinations depending on what time of day it is. I don't know. I think it's really hard to tell. So this dovetails, I think, into one of my questions really well, which is Kerr going to emphasize the old trusted players, the Loonies and the Paytons, or is he going to lean on these new guys? Like, were these new guys signed to be for sure rotation locks, or are they just like supplemental optional pieces that he's going to plug in when he feels right? But like, if Payton's healthy, he's there. Looney's going to be the backup 5. Because I don't know. I don't know what he's going to prioritize at this point. It feels like they gave a large contract to Buddy Hield. They're going to prioritize him. Melton could have had offers from a lot of teams. He chose to sign in Golden State on a 1-year contract, I think, to do kind of the Dante DiVincenzo route, even though DiVincenzo was at a lower number. But I think it's that similar idea. 1 year, plays pretty significant role. He fits so well with Steph, and then parlay that into a larger long-term deal. But does he have like a guarantee that that's going to happen? Does Kirk care if he has a guarantee? So how does that play? It's a really interesting question. I think the fact that they're committing to pods in the starting lineup, which all the talk seems to be, does question, okay, what does it look like to stagger him and Steph, or are they going to put the ball in Melton's hands? You've talked about, do they run Draymond or even Kyle Anderson as kind of that backup unit point guard? And so those kind of trickle down effects, it's all trickle down. It's if you're starting Kuminga at the 3, Wiggins comes off the bench then, or then so then that's going to squeeze Moody out. That's going to squeeze probably Melton out as a little bit of that bench defense and maybe give more of a role to Buddy Hield. But if it's the other way and you've got Kuminga off the bench, okay, well then you need more of the defensive help. And so maybe Melton gets more minutes. It really, there's so many different nuances they're going to spin out of what happens with the starting lineup. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see in the preseason how those go, and if Kerr is willing to trust guys like Melton and Buddy Hield, or if he's going to go back and go, no, I know my guys. I know Looney. I know Payton. They're tested. I'm going to lean on them.
Yeah, I mean, the team, like you're going through all these players, the team's just too damn deep. It just is, and that's what we've been saying the entire offseason. And that's great if there's some injuries or any other unavailability concerns or whatever else. Fantastic. You got guys that you'll then just have to play, and they're capable NBA players. There's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's fortunately, but unfortunately at the same time, Mike Dunleavy Jr. said the Warriors are going into training camp with an entire full bill of health. Like everyone's fine, ready to go. And therefore that's just going to create all this chaos and uncertainty and question marks for Steve Kerr that we as fans, we're just automatically going to be frustrated by some of the decisions he has to make. We just are. That's going to happen. And I spoke about it on last episode, 14-man main roster. If Lindy War is the third and Guy Santos are out of the equation, that leaves 12. I think most people would look at Loon and Payton as the ones to be outside of the 10-man rotation then. But at the same time, again, if those guys are fit and healthy, then Steve has shown immense trust in them in the past. And even I was looking at GP2 on Basketball Reference the other day, and I was shocked. His on-off numbers, the Warriors were plus 7.5 net rating in his minutes last season, and only plus 1.3 when he was off the floor. So they were significantly better still when GP2 was out there, albeit he was still very limited by injury and whatnot. So that is really fascinating to see where things go from here. My second point, I've been hesitant to talk too much about Andrew Wiggins just in terms of what he's been going through in the past few weeks with the passing of his father, and then therefore setting expectations on what we should see from Wiggs at the start of the season. But Steve was asked about it yesterday and more than comfortable to answer it. And so, more than comfortable to answer it. And so I'm more than comfortable to talk about it now. And I was somewhat surprised with how Steve responded. I think with what Wiggs has been going through, it would have been very easy for Steve or the Warriors in general to kind of temper expectations on Andrew Wiggins a little bit. He went the other way. He could not have been more glowing, I think, of where Andrew Wiggins is right now. Said he looks in great physical condition. Said that he's going to feature heavily in the offense this season to a point where it made it sound like this guy was potentially going to be the second option offensively, which he's never really been at the Warriors. Even in that All-Star season where he was the second best player on a championship team, he was still fourth on the team in scoring at 17.2 per game. And it's funny how Steve labeled him yesterday as, he's a 20-point-a-game guy. Well, no, he's not. He hasn't been that at the Warriors. At no point in his tenure at the Warriors has he averaged 20 points a game. He's just not done that. And so I'm really interested to see if, has this gone too far where we don't think it can turn around and he can be anything like he was in that kind of one-off season in 2021-22? Or can he actually get back to somewhere near his best? And can he be a guy that averages around 20 points a game like he did in Minnesota, but with the efficiency that we've seen in Golden State, and while being the team's primary perimeter defender as well? What are your expectations for Andrew Wiggins? Because they seem fairly high from an internal perspective.
I think you have to expect that he's going to tick up based on where he has been the last 2 years. I mean, 2 seasons ago he was playing well, and then he was out for a while, came back and just didn't have it, and understandably so. And then last season it just really seemed like he was divided and wasn't able to fully commit to, focusing on basketball. Again, understandable, but he had, essentially his worst season ever. And so, you almost have to say he can only go up from here, right? And it seems like if he's communicating back to the Warriors, hey, I'm feeling good, I'm ready, I'm in the right headspace. And, I don't think that's something he could do the last 2 years. And the Warriors, were very tight lipped about what was going on. Now they feel more comfortable talking about it, which suggests to me Wiggins feels more comfortable. So it seems like the stage is set from that standpoint, as much as we can tell from our perspective, for him to have a bounce back year. Now, is that a bounce back to just playing a little bit better, a little more energy, a little better defensively on the glass, or is he able to really step back into that number 2 scoring role? Is he going to take that before Kuminga can fully snatch it? I don't know the answer to that. I would almost expect that at this point it's Kuminga's spot to lose, and Wiggins maybe settles in a step below that. But if Kuminga's shot doesn't come around and Wiggins' shot is there, he has a track record of being there. He's got the 22 championship run to, hang his hat on. So I could see it for sure. I'm going to say it's not very likely to me that he's going to bounce all the way back, but I think it has to take a step up from where it was last year, because it was just really bad last year.
Yeah, I think there's this assumption that that second scoring option will just be Kuminga, unless until such point is there's a massive trade for another All-Star caliber player. There's just this assumption that it's Kuminga because that's kind of what we saw in the second half of last season. But yeah, the way I just found it really interesting the way Steve was talking about Wiggs yesterday and made it seem like he's headed for a bigger role than maybe like we expected. And as you say, if the Kuminga shooting stuff doesn't work out and he's therefore limited in how many minutes he can actually play, then it might simply be a case of, well, Kuminga's only averaging 25 minutes and Wiggins is averaging 32 to 34, and therefore you'll just see on the scoring averages that Wiggins is averaging more points. Now, maybe per 36, that's not the case, but just because of the more playing time, that is how things will unfold here. So super interesting. Have you got another question mark talking point entering training camp for us?
Yeah, I do. So much of the conversation this summer, are they going to trade Kuminga? Is he going to step up? Podziemski, they see him as a budding star. They're going to trade him. And you referenced it earlier. I do have love in my heart that is undying for Moses Moody. And so I want to see, is this finally the year Moses Moody is allowed to have a full-time role, where Steve Kerr going to keep pushing him around at the edge, at the fringe, never committing, never really using him? We know that he looks good out there. He looks comfortable with Steph and everybody else, but he just hasn't played. So, Peter, I've got a trivia question for you. In the 2021 draft, Moses Moody was the 14th player selected. Where do you think he ranks in his draft class in total minutes played 3 years in?
Just regular season, I'm assuming. We're not going to include the somewhat little bit of playoff minutes he's been getting in his first 2 seasons. That is a great question. It can't be, I don't know, 20th?
28th.
28th. 28th. Yeah, right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, a full 14, spots he slid down, if you
double,
will.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys who are kind of right around him or just below him have missed time due to injury, and Moody really hasn't. Kuminga is, let's see, he is 14th. So,
yeah, right. Okay. So he's also gone from 7 to 14. Like,
he
perfect
has.
symmetry there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Some of the names have jumped up. Ayo Dosunmu is 6th. He's played over 6,000 minutes in 3 seasons with Chicago. A couple of the, Trey Murphy's jumped up. He's played really well. Sengun, some names you'd expect.
Who's first? Like Scotty or someone?
Scotty Barnes is number 1, just barely ahead of Franz Wagner. And you got Jalen Green, Herbert Jones, who, has jumped up a lot, Evan Mobley. But here's some of the names of guys who have played more minutes from this draft class than Moses Moody.
I'm looking forward to this.
Trey Mann on the Thunder, the Hornets, Trey Mann, Chris Duarte, who essentially is everybody's playing hot potato. Nobody wants Chris Duarte. Zaire Williams, the bust of a forward for the Grizzlies, essentially. He's played more minutes. Bones Highland,
Oh,
And then 4 undrafted players. 4.
yeah,
Jose Alvarado, Sam Hauser, Austin Reeves, not
yeah,
surprising, and Trendon Watford has played more minutes than Moses Moody. And
yeah,
so, to some extent, okay, maybe Moody hasn't earned it or whatever, but I think you have to conclude that Moses Moody is better than some of those players at
yeah,
least, or
yeah. For sure.
deserves more of opportunity. To think of maybe a similar-ish type of player like Corey Kispert on the Wizards, he's played well over 2 times as many minutes as Moses Moody. And part of that's
Mm,
playing on a bad team, and the Warriors have had more options, but he just hasn't gotten an opportunity. Kerr has
mm,
just not put trust in him. And at times when he wasn't putting trust in Kuminga, there were things to point to. With Moody, it's more just this like, nah, it doesn't feel right. Or,
mm,
okay, maybe he's got defensive lapses or something, but it looks good when Moses Moody is out there. He kind of knows where to be. He seems to have great chemistry with Steph. He plays this position, this role that you would think the Warriors really need, especially when Wiggins was struggling. And
yeah,
Kerr just has never put the trust in him. So does he have a full-time role? They didn't really add a player who kind of lined up right with his role. It seems like he would be the backup, small forward, if you will. But is he going to get crowded out again? I mean, probably, just given the track record. But like, if he's going to get a shot, this is the chance. And so I want to see in the preseason, is he like coming right in, one of the early subs? Like, is he in the rotation, or is he like guy 11 again? And it just seems like another lost season. At which point you have to assume someone's going to trade for him, because the Warriors just aren't going to re-sign him if they just again can't find a spot in the rotation for him.
Well, if I tell you what, if you were a team interested in Moses Moody, you would look exactly at that statistic you were looking at, minutes played from guys from the 2021 draft class, and that is like numero uno reason as to why you're trading for this guy, because you're going to get him reasonably on the cheap. Like, the Warriors aren't going to be able to ask for too much for Moses Moody, given they haven't played him, and there's all this upside and development that you could potentially get. Just throw him out there and see what he could develop into. And I think all of us think, yep, like this has got to be the season, right? It has to be the case. He's ready to go. And yet, again, you just mentioned the track record. The track record's got to a point where I won't believe that Moses Moody is a genuine, consistent rotation player for Steve Kerr until I actually see it. Like, I'm done forecasting, expecting anything. I'm just going to be pleasantly surprised if we, come preseason, come the start of the season, and all of a sudden, he's like this 6th, 7th man or whatever, and he's playing over 20 minutes a game, which is also the big frustration because I've dove a lot into Moses and his minutes, and it is clear that he just plays so much better with the more game time he gets per game. I don't have the numbers like directly in front of me, but like when he plays less than 15 minutes, he only shoots like 25% from three or something. And then when he plays more than 25 minutes, he shoots 40% from three. And that makes sense, right? You get in a rhythm, your shooting gets in a rhythm, that kind of stuff. So that all makes sense. But it's really frustrating when this guy, the more minutes you give him each game, the better he plays. And then it's not like the Warriors were horrific with him on the floor last season either. Like the team was still a plus, positive net rating when he was out there last season. So I don't know. I want to say yes, he will like develop into having a consistent role, but I can't. I just cannot do that, unfortunately. All right, my last point that I had here, I just wanted to talk quickly and get your thoughts on the end of the roster and the two-way guys. So, because that's obviously we've had a lot to do about that over the past week to 10 days with all the transactions the Warriors have been making. First of all, 13th, 14th roster spots. Kevin Knox the second. Your thoughts? I actually don't mind it because I think there's some upside in Knox, and I just look at the fact that he hasn't played with a good franchise ever in his career, essentially. Can you see a world in which he takes Guy Santos or Lindy Waters the third spot on the main roster at the end of preseason?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, 7th overall pick just a few years ago. He's hung around. He's had these big moments like in summer league and things like that. He looks like a guy who deserves to be on an NBA roster. I think the Warriors, given their depth, and you've talked ad nauseum all summer long about how they've just got, too many playable guys. So whoever you're going to use for those last couple of roster spots, have to be guys that have like upside to become something more.
Yeah.
And so I think at this point, you know what Knox is. Like, okay, he's worked hard. He deserves a shot. He deserves to be someone's fifth forward. Um, and could he do that on the Warriors? Sure. But I think you want to use those last couple of spots on guys who have a chance to become something. And so, that's why I think like Post being there, or maybe Lindy Waters. Like I could see the outlines of maybe that, or Guy Santos. He's probably in that similar bucket where like I think we know what he is, especially the fact, I think you just mentioned on a recent podcast he couldn't like find a way to score the basket when he was the only NBA player on the Brazil national team at the
Yeah.
Olympics, right? Like if he just can't find his way to an offensive role, I just don't know that he's going to have it in the NBA. But that's what you need to be doing, I think, as the Warriors with those last couple of spots. You have so much depth at every position except maybe center that you don't need to use spot 13, 14, 15 on guys whose ceiling is 10th man. Like you've got that covered. You don't need guys who necessarily are going to step in during the year. You want to take a shot at being able to give someone minutes with Santa Cruz, and they're going to make that leap to then be a real rotation piece in a year, in 2 years. And so that frees you up to trade multiple rotation players because now you've got a guy who's ready to step in. Adding someone, whether it's Knox, Santos, I think it's fine either way. I'm not super excited about Knox. I think we kind of know what he is, and so I wouldn't make room for him on the main roster if I was the Warriors.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with your point that the Warriors need a high ceiling guy, but I don't know. It's a weird take from me, and I'm not completely sold on it myself necessarily. But I do think he does have, like, he's clear, like, top 10 pick. Yes, he's 6 years into his career now. I get it, 6 years, but he's jumped around the league, and that talent doesn't necessarily, like, it can't go away overnight. Now, can it go away over 6 years? Yeah, maybe, but I actually think he does have higher upside than, like, 10th guy in the rotation. I do think he has upside at the right place in the right environment to be top 8 in the rotation. And like you saw that with GP2, like GP2 couldn't really get a spot in the league going into like 21-22 season, was fighting for the last roster spot with Avery Bradley. I would have thought that most of us at that time would have thought, oh, well, this is, for the end of the roster. And then all of a sudden, like GP2, who would have been 28, 29 at that point, climbed from getting the roster spot into being like top 8 rotation player on a championship team, let alone a team just trying to make the playoffs, which the Warriors are at the moment. So Knox is only 25, and I feel like I see that Peyton experience and see what the right role and right environment can do for a player, and think that, maybe like Knox still does have the upside and the talent to be more than, as you say, 10th, 11th guy in a rotation. So interesting. The other one is the two-way guys. I don't know if you know too much about Blake Hinson. I don't really, but obviously he's on a training camp contract, may have the possibility to overtake Beekman or Spencer. What are your thoughts on that? And what were your thoughts on the whole Daquan Plowden situation, which many Warrior fans have been left frustrated with after he officially departed yesterday, signing with the Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, I think that with Plowden, he obviously played extremely well in Summer League, and I understand why they made space to sign him. But at some point, they had to do something with Post. We knew they were going to. And when none of these offseason trades materialized to free up money or to free up a roster spot, they had to make a call. I think Reese Beekman would have been the obvious guy to cut, but I get that you need like an emergency break glass if you need him point guard, just because of how thin they are at point guard and ball handlers. So I understood that decision. The Pat Spencer one, I mean, he's like 28, almost 29. He kind of, how much upside does he have? But then he shows these little flashes, and you're just like, what if there's something there, right? So I kind of get that to an extent, but then that just means somebody had to get cut, and Plowden did. But how quickly he was scooped up speaks to kind of the value that teams saw in him. So I am kind of curious how they didn't maybe find a way or cut Beekman now, and you always could bring him back, on a 10-day or something if you really needed him. So I do think that was interesting. As far as Hinson or Jackson Rowe or someone pushing their way in, I think if you cut Plowden to add Post and not Beekman or Spencer, I have a hard time seeing one of those guys getting cut for Hinton or Rowe or any other guy they might bring into training camp. So I think Knox would be the one option to get on the roster, but then obviously he can't be a two-way because of his experience. So, yeah, I just think at this point, those probably seem pretty locked into me if they were going to cut a guy like Plowden anyway. So,
yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. All right, have you got anything else for us, or we've covered your three, have we?
yep, we've hit on my three. Yeah, I think we talked about it with the lineups, but I think just the big question is, are they going to go big or are they going to go small generally with the starting lineup? Because I think that your trickle-down effect then, who's getting squeezed? Is it Looney and Kyle Anderson getting squeezed, or is it, Moody and Gary Payton and Buddy Hield getting squeezed? So that's just like the big question. I just want to see, who do they start with the first preseason game throughout the preseason? I'm really interested to see that.
Yeah, well, just quickly on that, Mike Dunleavy Jr. made a point in his presser yesterday of outlining how he wants the Warriors to be a top 5-7 defense, top 5 to 7 defense this season. So if that's the case, that would hint to me like their path to being top 5 defensively is starting another big man next to Draymond. I would have thought we saw that at the end of last season with him and TJD. So if that's the case, then maybe that's going to be the starting lineup where we're going to see Draymond at the 4 and another genuine big, most likely obviously TJD at the 5. Where does that leave Kuminga again? Because, TJD is not a shooting 5, and so is Steve going to put him at small forward? Unlikely based on what we've heard so far. Very, very fascinating stuff. Anyway, any other plans for your weekend?
I got some stuff at church going on this weekend. Probably watch a little football. My fantasy football team. I'm 0-3, but every loss has been by like 2 points. So I'm basically like the Lakers Nuggets series of fantasy football. So we'll see what happens this week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that. AFL Grand Final day here for us in Australia. So as I said to you before, a beer is calling me from the fridge, so I better go and do that. Thanks again, Josh, for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Happy to come on anytime.